What is going on, everybody? So this has been an extremely fun month for the ROG Ally. There's been ups and downs, there's been positives and negatives, and for me mostly there have been positives to the ROG Ally. Now the same goes for the Steam Deck. When it first came out, there weren't too many games that were playable. A lot of people had to mess around with Proton, and for the most part, a lot of the games that I mainly loved, like Resident Evil 6, Street Fighter 4, didn't seem to work. And it's strange because those are PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 games, so you would expect them to work with a console as powerful as the Steam Deck. But unfortunately, no matter what I do, a lot of these games on this list just do not seem to work on the Steam Deck, but work perfectly on the ROG Ally. And by not work, for the most part, I mean just doesn't start or doesn't work as intended, which could also mean there are malfunctions with video output, sound, or gameplay aspects, to the point of unplayability, or just an aspect that's missing that makes you feel like you're missing out on an important part of the game. And all these games were tested at either 720p or 800p with default Steam Deck performance settings, which means it's not at a specific wattage or GPU power output. And with the ROG Ally, most of these games were tested in performance mode or turbo mode, depending how demanding the game is. So these are the 20 games that work on the ROG Ally that just do not work on the Steam Deck, and just games I had to delete from the Steam Deck and reinstall on ROG Ally altogether. So the first game on the list is Forza Horizon 4. This game has been playable for a good amount of time on the Steam Deck, and I've been going back into it and out of it. And for the most part, when you're in the main map, there are a lot of slowdowns that fluctuate between 25 to 35 FPS and a ton of stuttering if you bring the graphics anywhere over low settings. But that would have been just all fine and good, because for some reason, if a game stutters on the Steam Deck, it's actually good for battery life. But this game, in some parts of the map, stuttered to a point that affect my driving. But that's not even the main issue. Eventually, the game crashes only after 20 minutes. And I've timed it, it's been average 20 minutes after starting the game. For some reason, the game slows down to a crawl to 2 to 5 FPS, or the controller just randomly stops working. And this just doesn't seem like a game issue. When I see problems like this occur, it's either a hardware or an OS issue. And you've guessed it, it is actually a Proton problem, and specifically going into gaming mode. I usually play this game in desktop mode when gaming mode wasn't exactly supported in docked mode, and the game worked just fine. But in gaming mode, where most people operate their games on the Steam Deck, for some reason Forza Horizon 4 always crashes after about 15 to 20 minutes. It is sometimes shorter than 20 minutes. And that leads me to the next game, naturally, Forza Horizon 5. There are even more crashes and freezes with this particular title. After about 15 to 30 minutes max, the controller randomly disconnects, which is the same exact thing that happens in Forza Horizon 4, and the FPS just drops to 1 or 2, which make the game actually unplayable. And then eventually, after the infinite freezing, the Steam Deck just reboots itself. And it's such a shame, because I was looking forward to playing Forza Horizon 5 and 4 on the Steam Deck, specifically because it's on the go. And it is disheartening to have a game playable but actually not work. And I think Forza Horizon 5 is verified. So yeah, the most important games to me on this list are Forza Horizon 4 and 5. I just absolutely love those racing games. I'm a sucker for racing games, but when it comes to the Steam Deck, for some reason, there are tons of racing games that just randomly crash. But with Forza Horizon 4 and 5 on the ROG Ally, the game works astonishingly good. It goes even up to 60 FPS with high settings at 1080p, but that's in turbo mode. In performance, you can go down to medium at 1080p and it'll still reach FPS around 40. This game is extremely playable, and guess what? It doesn't crash after 30 minutes like it does still on the Steam Deck. So I have virtually no issues. In fact, I'm more impressed with the ROG Ally version, simply because you can sign in with Windows Hello, because every time I eject my SD card from the Steam Deck, it requires me to sign in over and over and over again with Forza Horizon 4 and 5. But with the ROG Ally, I can simply use Windows Hello, my fingerprint, and it just signs in 1 second. So that makes the game even more playable than playable. And I'm just going to add this one on the list on the fly. I made an entire list already, but I realized that a lot of racing games don't seem to work that great on the Steam Deck, specifically Need for Speed games. And that's also a shame, because the Nintendo Switch had a racing game problem. It has two really well-known racing games called Burnout Paradise and Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, but those aren't the ones I really wanted to play. I really love Need for Speed Heat and Payback. And you guessed it, Need for Speed Heat crashes every 20 minutes, and the FPS goes to a crawl after 10. For some reason, this game just doesn't work that well on the Steam Deck most of the time. But on the ROG Ally, there are virtually no issues and the resolution is so much better. A lot of you might have no issues with Need for Speed Heat, but just roaming around in the game for me always led to some crashes. Now the next game on the list is Catherine Classic. Now I played Catherine full body on the Nintendo Switch and I absolutely hate it. It adds way too much of what wasn't there in the original to the forefront of the story, and it just makes it feel like an entirely different game. I actually don't like the flow of full body. So playing it on the Nintendo Switch or using Yuzu to emulate it on the Steam Deck or ROG Ally is a no-go for me because I just do not like full body. So I tried Catherine Classic on the Steam Deck, and even with all types of workarounds, this game is just unplayable. After the intro, the game just crashes, or if you try to load a 100% save data, which I try to do, after that last boss, which is where the save data was, which by the way is an extremely difficult boss and took me about 2 hours to beat. But after you finish off that boss, the game crashes. So I never went back to that game ever again on the Steam Deck. But the first thing I loaded up on the ROG Ally was Catherine Classic, and it's absolutely amazing. The FPS is perfect and it's 1080p. It works just as intended. The next game on the list is Bright Memory Original, not Infinite. The official Steam version for Steam Deck is completely unsupported. I even tried making it into a third-party game, and the game just doesn't run very well and crashes every so often on the Steam Deck. It's just way too difficult to try to make this game work. And for the most part, it won't even start up. On the ROG Ally, I've been playing it since day one because I love the original. I like the controls better. I just like the enemies better. It's a little creepier. It has a better theme in general than Infinite. And on ROG Ally, the FPS is incredibly impressive. And I bumped that thing all the way up to 1080p and it still works great. Now, another first-person shooter that I tried consistently to work on the Steam Deck is DEATHLOOP. That game is verified on the Steam Deck, but every time I start it, it either loads infinitely or it crashes after a few minutes. I tried looking into a lot of fixes for this game. I eventually got one, and then I moved the game from one SD card to another, and all of those fixes kind of just disappeared. But I have officially finished DEATHLOOP on the ROG Ally because that game is just not long at all. It still has some issues like FPS drops, but for the most part, it's playable on the ROG Ally at 1080p. And most importantly, there aren't constant crashes while playing it on the Ally. And the next game on the list, a lot of people might not like it too much, but I absolutely adore this game, and that is Marvel's Avengers. There's a certain point that I cannot pass on the Steam Deck specifically. Every time I try to finish that mission, the game just crashes and I have to play the mission all over again. I tried multiple fixes for this with Proton and other outlets, but nothing seems to work. It's been unplayable since day one for the Steam Deck, so it's kind of no surprise that the game has a lot of issues on the Steam Deck, especially with all of its crashing. But after a while, after trying different missions, the game just crashed randomly in certain areas. It was sometimes after a 1.5 hour long mission, which to me is just unacceptable, especially if you try as hard as I do in that game. But on the ROG Ally, that was also one of the first games that I booted up and tried, and guess what? The game works so well, especially during those busier missions like the city location. That location on the Steam Deck just ruined the system. It usually crashes right when I start one of those missions in the city. But the ROG Ally handled it like a champ. I tried multiple locations and played it for about 6 hours straight, no crashes. Now, another title I really wanted to work on the Steam Deck because it just has the aesthetic of the Steam Deck, the futuristic feel to it, and that is Detroit Become Human. This game is virtually unplayable due to the extremely low and inconsistent FPS that I get every time I go back to it on the Steam Deck. I go back to it because I hope that it will work. For some reason, this game I think is either playable or verified, and I find that just borderline false advertisement. It was an absolutely horrible experience trying to play this game on the Steam Deck, even with the lowest settings and the lowest resolution. I'm not sure what game Valve was testing when they graded this one verified, but on the ROG Ally, it actually works very well. I just lock it at 30 FPS, but I put the resolution to 1080p. Somehow this game works incredibly well, and you can get more FPS if you boost it up to turbo mode. Now, there's one infamous game that I was hoping would work on the Steam Deck eventually, at least within 5 or 6 months, and we're at that point, and Returnal is still unplayable on the Steam Deck. I tried everything I could with this game, and I heard that Cryo Utilities works, but the thing is, when you install that, you're going to have to reinstall it after every every update, and that's just a pain in the ass, especially after using so many plugins and having those not work after every update. I'm gonna have to update the plugins and update cryo utilities. I have another system. It's called the ROG Ally, and it can play Returnal just fine. I don't need cryo utilities to boost it up by 5 or even 10 FPS. It already goes that high on the ROG Ally, and I have a good time with it. I get a somewhat consistent 30 to 40 FPS on the ROG Ally, while it goes down to 18 FPS on the Steam Deck, and even lower in some cases. The next game, Halo Master Chief Collection. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say that it does work on the Steam Deck. Yes, it works very well. But what doesn't work is specifically Halo 2 Anniversary Remastered graphics. For some reason, every time I switch over to Halo 2 Anniversary graphics, the game either crashes consistently or the FPS goes down to a crawl, and there's just constant stuttering. I tried everything I could to fix this specific game in the Master Collection, but it just does not work. You can still play with the original graphics, but if one part is consistently unstable, and if there is some random crashes even after a year with that specific game, then yeah, to me, it doesn't quite work. But it's still marked playable on the Steam Deck. And it's been unplayable for the longest time. But I think they just did that because most of the games work very well, and most of the graphic settings work very well as well, and you can set the resolution lower, but the game looks so horrible with lower resolution. I just do not recommend it. But on the ROG Ally, the first thing I played was Halo 2 Anniversary with the upgraded graphics. Now, the reason why this game is important to me, specifically with the upgraded graphics, is because it kind of looks just like that original E3 demo look for Halo 2, where the graphics just look so astonishing that it didn't look like it was an Xbox game. Well, most people guessed it. It did not look like it was an Xbox game, and when the game officially launched, it didn't quite look the same. In fact, it was kind of like the 2D version of what they showed us. But on the ROG Ally, when I boosted up to turbo mode, or even at performance, the game plays vastly better with Halo 2's Anniversary graphics upgrade. And that leads me to the next game, LA Noire. With this specific title on the Steam Deck, there's just constant crashing, FPS slowdowns, and it just always requires a Rockstar launcher update. Every time I start it up, it compiles memory over and over again, 1 gigabyte each, and I always need to go into desktop mode and delete those files myself. It's a pain in the butt to play on the Steam Deck because it goes through the Proton layer, so it thinks you don't have a Rockstar launcher, and it just completely reinstalls it over and over and over again, and that's just unacceptable, especially if you just want to start up a game and it just tells you, hey, you don't have a Rockstar launcher, you need to update or re-download it or reinstall it. So you spend about 20 minutes reinstalling the Rockstar launcher, and after that, LA Noire is just not worth it because the game isn't even that great. But on the ROG Ally, you could just install it once and it knows you have it because you don't have to go through any kind of Proton layer, and the game just works as intended all the time without any kind of crashes. Now, there's a different game that's kind of a curious case, and that is Devil May Cry HD Collection. As old as this collection is, for some reason the video playback for every single cutscene outside of in-game is completely backwards. So trying to understand any written words in the cutscene is just impossible. The actual game works, but something about having backwards cutscenes, to me, just doesn't make it the same experience that it originally was, and it doesn't make it the experience that it was intended to be. But I tried this on the ROG Ally, and it seems to work perfectly fine, but that cutscene issue was most likely caused by Proton. I tried multiple fixes, but for some reason the cutscenes just stay backwards. So that was kind of another letdown because I spent money on it specifically to play it on the Steam Deck, and the cutscenes just didn't work quite right. And we all know Devil May Cry 3 specifically has the best cutscenes in the series. The next game on the list is a classic as well, and that is Splinter Cell Double Agent. While trying this game with multiple Proton versions, the image is either warped or Proton is just messing with certain textures like skyboxes or the water. It makes everything look murky and just the same. So when it comes to dark stealth missions, which are most missions in Splinter Cell because you use your night vision, it's kind of impossible to navigate through the world without wondering where the heck are you because the skybox looks exactly like the floor. And trying to play this game for a while, the game frequently crashes, and when it works, it's kind of a stuttery mess. On the ROG Ally, this game works as intended and basically perfect. I'm almost at the end now, and it's bringing back a lot of good memories playing this on the Xbox 360, and to me it's like one of the best Splinter Cell games out there. But unfortunately it just doesn't work on the Steam Deck for now. Now number 14, this should be number 14, is a very important game, especially on the Steam Deck. It was advertised to work, and a lot of people bought the system just to play this specific title, and that is Red Dead Redemption 2. I tried to work this title for about 5 to 6 hours straight at some point, trying different types of Proton versions, and when you do that, you need to reinstall Rockstar Rockstar Launcher every single time. Or it says that you already installed Rockstar Launcher and you have to use that version. But for some reason, I just couldn't find the version, so I had to go into desktop mode and do all of these things, deleting the previous versions, renaming the other version into new. There's just so much I had to do to get this game to semi-work. But when I finally got into the game, the FPS just floated around 25 to 29. So that kind of eliminates the possibility of using the first-person perspective included with the game. But if everything is set to low, it stays at a locked 30 FPS. But I've tried every other setting for this game on the Steam Deck, and after about 9 months of trying, I find that Red Dead Redemption 2 will crash every 15 to 30 minutes on this specific hardware. And I'm assuming it's because you're forced to use the DirectX version and not Vulkan, because a lot of people are saying that Vulkan is just not supported on Steam Deck, but every time I try to switch to Vulkan, no matter what I do, the game just automatically freezes up and crashes. So I was stuck with a version of this title that crashed every 15 to 30 minutes, and after about a year I just gave up and stopped playing it. But I recently played it on the ROG Ally, and the FPS is in the mid 50s and sometimes higher depending what your settings are. But I put everything to medium at 1080p and it's around 50 FPS. When you bump it up to turbo mode, you get even better. And I think it's because you can actually use Vulkan with this version, and Vulkan just works a lot better with this game. The ROG Ally can actually play this game without any issues, which is a big relief. So I played about 5 hours of it and officially verified it playable. I bet that's more time that Valve spent with the Steam Deck version. The next game on the title is probably inconsequential to you guys, but personally, I love this game, and the fact that it just doesn't seem to work on the Steam Deck is a bummer, and that is Killer is Dead. I love Suda51 games. They always have this creepy Japanese vibe to them, and this sort of niche theme that just rubs off really well on Suda51 games, and Killer is Dead has all of that, including a crazy assortment of moves, action scenes, and just a mind-boggling storyline. But on the Steam Deck, there are frequent crashes, and the game seems to stutter a ton, to the point of unplayability. No matter what Proton version I use, it either crashes or it stutters every 2 seconds. I finally gave up a couple months ago, but Killer is Dead works exceptionally well on the ROG Ally. I've tested it over and over and over again, put it through its paces, and it plays absolutely well, especially for a newer system like ROG Ally. But the Steam Deck is a year old and this game just still doesn't work that right. And it's one of my personal favorites. And the next game is one of the first that I tried on the Steam Deck, because it was one of my favorites on the PS3, and that title is Sleeping Dogs. On the Steam Deck specifically, there are crashes here and there, and this game has been unsupported since day one on the system. The FPS usually hovers around 25 to 29 in most cases, and I'm surprised this hasn't properly been patched by now and improved over time. It has been over a year. But on the ROG Ally, this game plays at 1080p 60 FPS without any issues whatsoever, and I love it. I'm still never going to beat this title, but I play it every once in a while just to have fun. And there's another classic that surprisingly doesn't work on the Steam Deck. That is Alone in the Dark. After the game's intro, it just crashes. It's absolutely unplayable, and I know it'll be some time before we can get these games to work, and I'm sure Valve will improve them over time, but I really wanted this one to play portably. I love the rebooted Alone in the Dark. And of course on the ROG Ally, I'm able to play it with no issues, but yeah, it's a real bummer that it just crashes after the intro on the Steam Deck. But oh well, that's why you get a different kind of device, just in case the other ones don't work. And one of the first titles I tried on the Steam Deck was Ultra Street Fighter 4. On the Steam Deck with specific Proton versions, you can play versus mode just fine, but for some unknown reason, it can't display any character story cinematics. And if you do happen to find some kind of workaround, it can display the cinematics but without sound. It seems like playing the game in desktop mode is the only way to fix this, but most people are going to play this in gaming mode, so I still count that. And that is the main feature of the Steam Deck after all. In gaming mode specifically, that makes the story mode virtually unplayable since you can't hear anything. And if you don't find that crazy workaround that I did, I don't even know how I got up to that point. You can hear the intro for about 5 seconds, and after that the screen just goes black and it crashes. But with ROG Ally, that was one of the first titles I tried, and till this day, after a month, it's still working perfectly fine. I already completed 10 arcade stories with different characters and no issues found. And speaking of fighting games, Injustice 1 just doesn't start on the Steam Deck. No matter what Proton version I set, what kind of workaround I try, for some reason the game just doesn't start at all. But when I played on the ROG Ally, it starts and it works incredibly well, and as intended. And the last title is Mortal Kombat 9. I know it's a random game to end the list with, but I've been trying to get this game to work, even though it is playable on the Steam Deck, for such a long time. I tried different Proton versions, of course, here and there. I tried reinstalling installing DirectX, everything that people told me to do online. I read countless Reddit posts and just couldn't get one of my favorite fighting games to work. And of course, this was one of the first games that I tried on the ROG Ally, and voila, it worked like nothing. Usually when games don't work on the ROG Ally, like say Street Fighter Cross Tekken, I have third-party versions of them that work perfectly fine. It has been proven that Steam itself just doesn't support the games anymore, or makes it harder for other PCs to play those games, and it's not Steam's fault. But I am going to point out the games that don't work on Steam's main handheld device, which is the Steam Deck, and Mortal Kombat 9 is one of them. But yeah, maybe I'll try to discover more games that just do not work on the Steam Deck. There are a ton that don't work right, or if they work, there's some kind of weird quirk or curious case with them. And these were some of the curious cases, as well as games that just do not work at all. But on the ROG Ally, I started them like nothing. And a lot of these games also have launchers or some kind of tie-in with the Windows platform. But a lot of those games that have tie-ins with the Windows platforms, like the Marketplace, etc., sometimes don't work on even Windows PCs. But with every title on the list, I've tried it right before making this list, and they still absolutely do not work right. But yeah, if you have any games that you've been trying to get to work on the Steam Deck and have been trying for painstakingly long hours or weeks, let me know in the comments below your pain of having a Steam Deck and just trying to start up a game and it's just randomly not working even though you paid for it and it's supposedly playable or verified, like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mortal Kombat 9. But yeah, these were my top 20 games that didn't work on the Steam Deck, or lowest 20 games, not sure how that works, but that also worked flawlessly, if not just worked on the ROG Ally. But sometimes the games work for some people, sometimes they don't work for others. And for me, it just so happens to be the latter. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and there's plenty more to come. See you guys in the next one. Later.